Good afternoon, everyone. If we can ask everyone to take their seats, the program will be beginning momentarily. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Sashari Zaroyan, Associate Dean of Strategic Engagement at Loyola Marymount University's School of Education. I'm honored to serve as your MC this afternoon for LMU's Forum on the State of Youth Mental Health, our second annual signature convening bringing together educators, community leaders, and advocates working to support the well-being of young people across our communities. Before we begin, just a few quick notes to help the afternoon run smoothly. Restrooms are located just outside the auditorium to the right, and emergency exits are located at the back of the room and also the front. Please take a moment to silence your phones. We'll have two panels today with a short transition between them, and we will conclude with a reception immediately following the program at the Rose Hill Terrace right outside. You will see a QR code on the screen where you can view the digital agenda and learn more about our panelists. Today's conversation is grounded in a simple reality. Schools are on the front lines of supporting youth mental health, and educators and community organizations are responding to the complex challenges that are facing young people. This forum brings together leaders across these sectors to reflect on where we are and how we can continue strengthening the partnerships that support our students. To begin our program, it is my pleasure to introduce the Dean of Loyola Marymount University's School of Education, Dr. Estela Zarate. Yes, we're gonna hold that applause for a moment. Estela Zarate is a nationally recognized higher education leader whose work embodies LMU's mission through a commitment to student success and equity. Her scholarship has examined the educational paths of immigrant students, students of color, and multilingual learners, and as well as school leadership preparation. A first-generation college graduate and a former English language learner, she earned her BA from Rice University and a PhD in education from UCLA. She has called Los Angeles home for over 25 years. Please join me in welcoming Dean Estela Zarate.
Thank you. Thank you, Sashari, for the introduction. Buenas tardes, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to Loyola Marymount University. Whether you're coming from around the neighborhood or across the city or county, and some people are probably still driving across the county, we're grateful you carved out time to be here for this important conversation. I'd like to start by acknowledging the original inhabitants of the land in which we are gathering. And I'll pause for a few minutes so we can reflect and read on these words. Oh, the words? Sorry. Okay, now we have them. Thank you. Next, I'd like to express my gratitude to our panelists and moderators for lending us your presence and your wisdom. Panelists will be introduced before each panel. I am also especially grateful to the leaders of our partner schools in the audience, to LMU Board of Regents Sandra Kipari-Fuchs and Christian DeLarkin, and to members of the SOE Board of Visitors here today. Drew Ferretti, Catherine Sanders, thank you for being here. And I know we're expecting also Casey Yeasel, and some of his team is here, and Veronica Melvin. Many LMU students, faculty, and staff are here today too. In particular, I'd like to greet my colleagues, Dr. Catherine Irwin, LMU Special Advisor and University Ambassador, and also, I know a member of Dr. Kawana Leggett's team is here. Thank you for being here. And also, thank you to our event sponsor, Kaiser Permanente, for their generous support of this event. Over the past few years, as I've interacted with colleagues, educators, and community and school leaders, I've heard over and over about mental exhaustion and unwellness among our youth. This is not surprising, given recent events and ongoing conditions that students are living through. The COVID pandemic increased isolation and loneliness for many. Gun violence in schools has sadly become a regular occurrence. We know that social media use often increases anxiety among youth, and rapid changes in the social political norms that have long guided us are unsettling. The strains on youth that many of you are seeing in schools is not anecdotal. A recent study published by the Public Policy Institute of California reports that over the past year, about 3 in 10 California children ages 12 to 17 reported symptoms that meet the criteria for serious psychological distress. 1/3 of students reported chronic sadness, and 14.5% of students reported suicidal thoughts. Here in Los Angeles, we've had unique and localized events that have further affected mental well-being. The devastation from last year's wildfires have reshaped entire neighborhoods. Our schools are feeling the impact of immigration enforcement that started this summer, as many families continue to fear sending their children to school. And children are experiencing trauma when family members or friends are detained and deported. Over the past year, immigration enforcement and dehumanizing rhetoric against marginalized communities have been particularly difficult to see and hear. At the intersection of our purpose-filled professions and love for the communities that we work with, we rightly experience that hollowness in our gut when we witness hate, violence, and devastation. I felt this deeply last summer when I delivered groceries to a former neighbor who was afraid of leaving her home. At her front door, she cried as she twisted her shirt in her hand. She cried because she feared her husband might be detained when he went to work. She cried out of frustration of spending the summer indoors with her 3 children. And she cried as a witness to the violent treatment of people who looked like her. As I offered a hug, I saw her children on the periphery, watching silently. I share this anecdote because I imagine many of our students have seen parents and caregivers struggling like this in the wake of recent events. And when children experience trauma, it affects how they show up at school and sometimes whether they show up at all. As educators, we know that trauma affects how students engage socially and cognitively. It alters the brain, ultimately influencing performance in the classroom and long-term social and emotional well-being. My colleagues and I are then compelled to ask, what can we do to accompany educators, school leaders, and mental health professionals right now? How can we contribute to building and sustaining school communities where all students thrive? To paraphrase Father Arturo Sosa, the 31st Superior General of the Society of Jesus, in his address last summer to the International Assembly of Jesuit Universities, how can we be agents of hope? One way that we serve this role is by simply carrying out our core mission, professional preparation. We prepare teachers who shape culturally responsive and inclusive learning environments where all students belong. We prepare school psychologists and counselors to create support systems for students, families, and other educators so that all members of the school community thrive. And we design bilingual certificates and concentrations so that we can grow a workforce that reflects and supports the diverse communities of California. And I could go on. Our school district partners drive the purpose of our work, and these collaborations enable us to strengthen mental health support in schools. Here are a few examples. The Center for Trauma-Informed Education, led by Dr. Bill Parham, also professor of counseling, is preparing 70 educators in trauma-informed responsive education at 7 Catholic schools and a public school. As part of their coursework, our faculty in the counseling department guide our students to run group counseling programs in area schools. In partnership with 6 schools and school districts and LACO, we recently received $1.5 million in state grants to fund counselor preparation through residency programs. In the past year, our students have also been the agents of hope who inspire me. Last summer, our counseling students set out to raise $500 for CHIRLA and ended up collecting more than $20,000. Our school psychology students organized a food donation drive and delivered groceries to families at Equitas Academy who were affected by fears of immigration enforcement. Our school psychology students also held their annual holiday gift drive for the West Side Regional Center, shopping for and delivering gifts to families of students with disabilities. Okay, I will stop bragging about our students and faculty because I really could go on, but you get the idea. This is an all hands on deck problem. And at SOE, we are rolling up our sleeves to solve it with you, our partners. Last year, at the State of the School address, I said that one of my priorities was to increase scholarship funding for professional preparation in mental health careers. And I'm happy to report on some of that progress. Through generous donor support, we are now offering scholarships for students in our Pupil Services Credential and Authorization programs. We raised funding to launch a bilingual certificate in counseling with an immersion trip to Mexico scheduled this summer. And we have begun to disperse more than $100,000 in scholarships funding for counseling students. I am proud of what we've done so far, but we are not stopping. 2 priorities will guide our work moving forward. First, we must continue to unburden our students from debt so that they can commit to working with the most vulnerable. Second, we have a vision of establishing a training clinic or clinics to integrate our mental health preparation programs into schools and surrounding neighborhoods. This will deepen our impact in the communities that need these services the most. I hope you have noticed that we take tremendous pride in this work. It is fundamental to our mission and values. The Jesuit concept of care for the whole person, cura personalis, is foundational to how we do our work. It is particularly relevant concept when we think about the role of schools as the first responders to trauma and sometimes the only providers of mental health support for families. At the same time, we know there is much more to learn and do, and today is an opportunity to learn from each other. We will hear our panelists share the ways they're building systems of mental health support, growing the provider workforce, and helping communities thrive. I'm excited to hear the ideas and solutions that will surface from today's discussions. Thank you for being here and for all that you do. We will now transition to our first panel, and Sashari will return to the podium for introductions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dean Zarate. Our first panel of the afternoon explores youth mental health, immigration, and school communities. Panelists, as I call each of your names, I ask you to come forward and take a seat on the panel. First, please welcome our moderator, Dr. Fernando Estrada, professor in the Department of Specialized Programs, Professional Psychology at Loyola Marymount University's School of Education. Please join me in welcoming one of our alums, Dr. Drew Ferretti, President and CEO of Bar Los Niños. Please join me in welcoming Margarita Luna, Strategic Implementation Lead at the California Endowment. And folks, please bear with us as one of our panelists is running a few minutes late in transition. And so I invite our panelists to welcome and Dr. Estrada, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Is this working? Yes? Awesome. Thank you to our panelists for joining us, and then we'll blend in Angélica when she gets in here. It's my honor and privilege to be amidst such experience and wisdom. And I know we don't have much time, so why don't I just simply jump into it? I mean, we know in this room, we can all agree that mental health and well-being, it's affected by systems. Macro, micro, right? Distal, proximal, right? And so yes, that does include, right, military interventions, right? Global war, yes. Federal kidnappings, right? Those are systems. Systems also include schools, education, right? Philanthropic efforts. And so you are seeing the impacts left and right. And so for us in this room, what do you want us to take away in terms of impacts that you are seeing that perhaps maybe we may not be privy to at this time? Positive impacts, negative impacts? What are you seeing based off of your lens and your expertise?
All right. I'll start, and then
Yeah, thank you, Drew.
you'll be smarter than me, sir. Thank you for that question. So one, I don't want to start on a down note, but I do want to say something and just pick up with what the dean talked about a little bit here. Thought about what are people not seeing and what's somewhat unseen, but is actually seen every day on the streets and in communities across Los Angeles. It does feel at times, I think that people feel like, oh, last summer was when it was really bad. And because we don't see, and because of things in other cities across the, and then I'll get to the good part, don't worry. Other cities across the country, more maybe in-your-face enforcement activity like we saw in the volume we saw it here in Los Angeles last year. People think that, well, maybe that's not happening as much here. It is. And I know that those of you who are working in community and in schools and following, you know this. It might not be happening with the National Guard around, but it's happening on street corners, at bus stops. It's still happening. And I would hope, one of the things I want, any group that I'm around, any person I'm around, I try to make sure that they walk away from me feeling like and knowing that it's not over. It's actually, in some ways, worse because it's getting quieter in terms of what is talked about across media. So that's one thing. Now, on the other side is, I think the systems that are in place or have come together are the informal systems, and formal or informal systems of partnership and collaboration that are resisting and are doing right by kids and communities. So Angélica will talk about this when she is here. It's almost like we work with CHIRLA or Betzetic or other groups that are partnering with us as the thousands of children, youth, and families that we work with every day, whether it's a one-off or a larger situation, getting resources, legal support, just help to navigate systems that are not set up for our families, and really oftentimes can result in deportation or through somewhat official channels. Being able to find those partners, organizational partners, but also just community members that are part of rapid response networks and letting folks know what's happening and where there might be danger for those families and children and families that might not have all the paperwork or documentation that is necessary to maintain what they can maintain and build to a thriving community. There you go. I was just talking about you. So I've although I started with here's the bad part, the good part is that we are building our own, community and neighborhoods are building their own formal and informal systems of support, resistance, and power to fight back against things that are are just unspeakable. So.
And Margarita, I want to hear from you, and Angélica, welcome. No, you're good. We're just talking about the kind of impact that you have witnessed relative to what's happening sociopolitically, locally, globally, in terms of your role. And I know CHIRLA has been so busy, so we'd love to hear from you. Margarita was going to share her
I'll let
insights.
you settle in, Angélica. So I don't think you could be alive today and not see the impacts that this is having in our communities. Even if you're taking a social media break, it's everywhere. And so I'm not going to talk about the harm, because I think we're all very well aware of the harm. I want to talk more about the resistance, and the resistance that we don't see, because that's often what's happening. That resistance is often quiet, it's deeply relational, and it's practical. I mean, even the dean talked about it today. It looks like parents organizing after school. It looks like promotoras providing information to their trusted community members. It looks like educators creating safe spaces in their own classrooms. It looks like young people leading Know Your Rights trainings for their families, for their communities, for their peers. We don't always name these things. We don't see them often if we're not being directly impacted. I think the other thing is that we don't name often the emotional and cultural power that is really, and the toll and labor that's happening here as well. So it looks like healing together. It looks like checking on your neighbors. It looks like being able to translate information for those that need it. It looks like attending appointments and hearings with people who are afraid. And so those are the kinds of things that I think are important for folks who are not directly impacted, don't often see and don't hear about. But I think what's really important is, and how powerful it is, to see, as you were naming, that there's alternatives that are being built in this moment to support communities during this very difficult time. And that looks like making sure that there's mutual aid, making sure that folks have their needs met, their daily needs met, with groceries being delivered. And there's organizations that are organizing that every day. It means coalition building. It means civic engagement. It means making sure that people are registered to vote. Those are the kinds of things that ultimately build power and lead to the kinds of wins that we do actually see in our communities. So I think it's important to, yes, there's a lot of harm that's happening, but it's also rallying people to get engaged and to really serve their communities in ways that they didn't know they could before.
Angélica, sort of as you hear Drew, as you hear Margarita, what comes to mind for you as you're thinking about some of the impact that you're witnessing, both at CHIRLA but locally?
Sure. So good afternoon, everybody. So CHIRLA's mission is to create a just society fully inclusive of immigrants, and the way we do that is we organize directly with immigrant communities across the state of California through regional committees made up of immigrant workers, farm workers, day laborers, domestic workers, and their family members, as well as we're in 18 high schools and in 48 college campuses working with immigrant youth. We believe deeply in the power of organizing, and through that power and with our leaders, with our grassroots leader advocating for just and humane policies, and certainly for just and humane immigration reform. So the first thing that I really want everybody to know is that it's important that we talk about what's actually happening. And I just want to say that I'm in enough places where there's a lot of people who ask me, is it still happening? Is it actually still going on? And so a lot of people are very dependent on what we call the mainstream media and the attention that the media puts on the issue. And as you know, national press came to Los Angeles the way they came during the time of the fires, and then left, and then they came back especially in June, and much of that attention left. And of course, the reason they left is because it was happening in many other regions. But what I really want everybody to understand is the Department of Homeland Security and the Immigration Enforcement never left Los Angeles. And so every single day, you will have people who are being arrested at a number around 30, 40, 50. We have days where people are arrested, over 150 people are being arrested and detained. And so it's happening every day. The only break we have had has been right now during the government shutdown. And so it's important for us to understand when they have resources, they will use them. And so we're right now, the only thing that's happening is this is when we're seeing, we're still seeing 10 arrests, 6 arrests, et cetera, but it's very different in terms of the scale. And I tell you this, having been doing this work now for 30 years at CHIRLA, and so I have never seen anything like this at sort of at the daily. And so while you might not see it on your social media, you might see it on the press, I need you to understand that it's happening every day, and this is hurting our community. But then I also believe deeply, which is to the point of this question, which is the resistance. So the resistance is happening in a way that it's multifaceted. So number one, of course, we run the Rapid Response Network, which is centering the people who are being detained and the family so that they have, when an arrest happens, that the family knows that there are organizations that can support them and their family member. And so responding, documenting, doing all that you now are more aware of, over 1,500 volunteers, over 80 organizations in coalition, also labor unions, the teachers, so many people involved. So organizing in that way, but through that and the documentation is actually resisting in the courts. So resisting and litigating against what's happening. We just submitted our amended complaint around Vasquez Perdomo, really naming the racial animus, the warrantless arrests, the excessive use of force, the lack of access to due process, and fighting it in the courts. There's so many other cases that we're part of that it's too long of a list to name because of the time, but challenging this administration at every level. So certainly the courts are a place of resistance. The other place of resistance is advocacy. So with the families and with our members, going up to Sacramento and asking this state to do everything possible in order to defend us. So right now, we have legislation proposals to further to further the accountability on these private detention centers and to really challenge the conditions in which our people are being detained and horribly, the manner in which they're horribly treated in these detention centers, not only the lack of access, but the inhumane treatment, the coercion that is occurring, just the excessive use of force, even in the detention centers. So asking our legislature to do everything possible at the local, at the state level. And then finally, and I'll finish with this, mobilizing to the polls, mobilizing our communities. So during the time of Prop 50, through our CHIRLA Action Fund, our political arm, we were able to get in less than 3 weeks over 33,000 people to participate in the election. And one of the things that we did is we focused on those regions where there had been the most enforcement all across the state of California. And we have never, in the history of CHIRLA doing Get Out the Vote campaigns, we had never seen so much response. 93% of the people that we connected with turned out. And so people are motivated, they're activated, and they want to have a say into the future. They don't just want to be victims, they want to fight back, organize and fight back.
I mean, that's really powerful for us to hear in this environment. And as I hear you, I'm thinking about our schools. I'm thinking about how schools can better equip teachers, administrators, families, and students. And I'm hearing the counter systems that are emerging, the Rapid Response Network. What else are you seeing that's working out there? Because educators are oftentimes very burdened with what's happening in the schools, and we do become siloed, and therefore we're not always privy to what is actually working. So from your various perspectives, what is something that you really feel is making a transformative difference for students, for families, as we think about the times that we're in?
I'll
Drew?
talk.
Yeah.
A couple faces popped into my mind, and it is it's the case managers, it's the social workers, it's the positions in schools that you don't always think about when you think about schools, right? But to the dean's point about the long-term impact of trauma, having our social work team not typically funded by your state funding, so going out there and finding either partners in philanthropy or other places to fund those sorts of things, but having social workers and case managers who really understand and are connected to our families to know why is somebody not at school, or what is the fear that we can address. Is it fear of just being out in the community, and how can we address that? Is it food insecurity? Is it housing insecurity? Is it economic insecurity just because of the climate we're living in? And having those people really be, we always talk about ourselves being relationship-based as an organization, and really making sure that that is there. Either it's our case managers and social workers, it's our promotores, it's our, we have a team of folks that are United Mental Health promoters that are out in the community, named United Mental Health promoters, but they are talking about everything because mental health is at the center of all of that. And if you don't actually address that and figure out who needs what services, you need counseling services, what's the clinical needs that are there, it leaves a deep impression, not just on the social emotional health of a child or a youth or a family, but their physiological health throughout their lives if you don't treat trauma right when it's happening. So I think that's one of the things, and really understanding, I think the teacher part of what you said also makes me think about so many of the folks that are part of our team live in the same communities that we work in. And so there's secondhand trauma that is impacting people. And there's also folks on our team, and probably all of our teams, that are worried about their own status or their own family status. And that also has an impact on how they can show up every day. So really understanding that, naming that, and doing something about it, making sure that resources are available there as well. I think back to a couple weeks ago when at our elementary school, there was an ice truck, wasn't there for our school, but it drove by. And it was during after school time, and every child and every staff member on the yard at that point was impacted. And that stuff stays if you don't do something about it. And so that's why we really try to make sure that we find ways to fund and get other positions in that will help around these things.
I'm hearing the multiple effects, right? The short-term, long-term impact of trauma exposure, right? And we see immediate effects, but sometimes it's those pernicious effects that appear later on. I mean, Margarita, sort of from your perspective, from your experience with the California Endowment, I mean, what are some priorities that for you are really standing out in terms of creating this kind of transformative change?
Yeah, so there's a couple of opportunities and also structural barriers to the kind of support that I think teachers and schools really need to support young people in this time. The first one is we have the Community Schools Initiative in California, which is an amazing opportunity to really address the supports that young people need from a holistic perspective. So the kind of support that you're talking about is possible through community schools, really targeting the communities that need it most. And then we also have the partnership of the Youth Behavioral Health Initiative, which also draws down Medi-Cal dollars in order to be able to serve young people. And young people can actually be peer health supports to their own, friends and peers in their schools through those dollars. The governor just proposed an additional $1 billion for community schools So that's another structural thing that we can all advocate for, that we continue to fund that work because it has been proven to show positive impacts for young people. I think the other thing is that during the pandemic, we all shut down, right? We still we're coming back and supporting young people to sort of come back from the impacts of that. One of the things that happened with schools is that we lost track of the partnerships, the community partnerships that we have, community-based organizations like CHIRLA, like so many others that are providing supports to families and to young people. And they have not been invited back onto school campuses. And so there's a loss there of the potential for community, nonprofits that are the safety net, the social safety net for so many organizations in our communities that are playing that role for families and for young people. And there's a problem there. There's a reason why there hasn't been that kind of partnership reestablished. And I know a lot of nonprofits that want to find their ways back into schools that have not been possible. So teachers can be advocates for those kinds of partnerships, recognizing that it can actually support the bottom line, which oftentimes is ADA, right? And so if we have these kinds of partnerships, it can support young people holistically in that way and support schools at the end of the day.
Angélica, I want to hear your perspective. You're making me think, Margarita, about some of the coalitions that have emerged that have been working now with teachers and educators in responding to immigration raids. It's very peer-to-peer, teacher-to-teacher, and that seems to really be gaining some important traction to getting vital information into the schools for how to protect young kids. Angélica, what sort of thoughts
Well,
do you
the
have?
first thing I think, especially when it comes to, mental health and support, is just to understand the power that each one of you who are connected to young people have. And that your ability to demonstrate to individuals that you're an ally, a place of safety, because right now a lot of young people don't know who to trust and whether or not they can even share with you what's going on in their lives. And so often, I think we underestimate how important it is for a young person to come to you and to say, actually, this is what's going on. This is what's bothering me. Not that you have the solution, but that you're connected. You can connect them to solution. But even that is so important right now because there is amongst the entire immigrant community a real concern as to whether or not their information, what they say, could fall in the wrong hands, et cetera. So I just want to say what's working. I just want to really say thank you to all the individuals that work with young people who are there for them in this moment, and that matters a lot. And I really want to highlight that. The other thing that's actually that I see that's really working, especially with young people, is number one is giving them voice. Is also understanding that they are going through this, but that they can be activated and participate. Advocacy. What is it that they can do? You've seen young people who are walking out of their schools, doing a lot of activity. What are the things that they want to do that give them voice? That matters. It really does, because it allows them not to feel like they don't have agency. Anything that gives young people agency is important. In the high schools, as I said, we work in 18 high schools. Our youth organizers are working with our immigrant youth, undocumented, unaccompanied minors, but also the U.S. citizen children of the undocumented parents. And so in the high schools, working with teachers and others, to do the presentations, to get the young people to also learn the Know Your Rights, but also for them to present it. And then we are in 4 high schools where we have Dream Resource Centers. So we advocated for legislation AB 278 in order for us to be able to have Dream Resource Centers in high schools. We have won previously Dream Resource Centers in colleges, Cal States, UCs, community colleges, and private universities also have these Dream Resource Centers, but we didn't have them in high schools. We passed the legislation, but we weren't able to get funding for them. But the LAUSD made a decision, which was the right decision, to actually invest in 4 pilot high schools to work directly inside the high schools, especially with our unaccompanied minors. Our unaccompanied minors just so you understand, arrived here without a legal guardian. They're with sponsors, but they're going through the immigration process. But as soon as they turn 18, they can be detained and deported. And so this is a lot of what the enforcement sometimes around the high schools is all about, is trying to get to these unaccompanied minors. So in these Dream Resource Centers, what we're able to do is, number one, focus on their leadership skills, their support for them, all the opportunities that exist in California for them to continue their education and really to promote that. But then the other part too is for them to feel safe, to understand how to protect their rights, and again, to be with other young people who are kind of going through the same thing, to create solidarity. That's working. The last thing I want to add is we have student legal services that we were, again, another win at the state level. So we have student legal services that are available in most of our universities, Cal State's community colleges and the UCs, again, some private universities, Loyola is one of them, where you have available student legal services that are available to the students, their families, and also your staff. It matters a lot right now that somebody could go to a Dream Resource Center, if not a Dream Resource Center, on campus, student legal services. So what we've been able to do is expand our capacity to serve students at all these universities and make sure that, that we're extending free legal services to young people. Many of the people who come to us are on student visas, they're on different kinds, and they just have questions. So I just really want to say the investment in student legal services, not just for immigration, I will say, for all types of needs, I think is something that's working right now and should be really expanded.
Any thoughts, Margarita or Drew, kind of as you hear Angélica mention some of these? I mean, I have my own thoughts here, and I can go in multiple directions, and I know we have maybe about 3 to 4 minutes left. But I'm really struck by what I oftentimes tend to hear is this sort of tension between the need to empower and to activate agency, right, to promote action, while at the same time safeguarding security, safety, managing very real threats. I mean, as we look ahead, this is, like you all said, this hasn't gone anywhere. If anything, it's looking to reshape itself, as we've talked about earlier. What can we do to continue to help our constituents, our students, our families do precisely that, which is take action, uplift their voices while simultaneously protecting them, keeping them safe?
Yeah. Just before this panel, we were talking about AI, and I was sharing how my 13-year-old is constantly telling me how to navigate it, and showing me which videos on social media are not real. So I think that young people are actually going to be okay navigating this very complex world, because they've already had to navigate so much complexity. I mean, to be a young person during COVID, to be a young person during these administrations, I mean, they're going to be okay. So I think we need to trust them. We need to trust that they're experts in their own experience and knowing how to navigate this complexity. So arming them with the kind of information that Angélica is talking about, the know your rights, they're providing that to their peers, they're providing it to their parents, to their communities. They're leaders of today. They're not leaders of tomorrow. And so I think that's the one thing we need to trust them to really take this information and to really empower others, not just themselves, to do this work. Yeah.
I hear that. Folks are hearing it. Drew, some final thoughts, and then I want to come to Angélica.
So I'll do this quick because I know we're running out of time. Really quick story for us at Para los Niños. Even before the November, whatever year that was, 24 election, we started preparing for what could be before we knew the outcome. And we felt, I'm looking at Sarah Figueroa Freeman, our executive vice president, also an LMU alum, who is one of the leaders of prepping us as an organization to know what is a sanctuary policy, doing guardianship, all the things that we needed to do. And then the fires happened. And a lot of for good reason, a lot of the focus locally went to that and not what was coming later in January. And I will say myself and some of my colleagues, we looked around saying, well, who is leading the resistance? Who is out there? And it really was this moment of, oh, well, wait, it's not about who's leading it, who's doing the work. And so I think how we continue to get through this is we do work like probably this week already. I'm sure we've already called CHIRLA for, hey, we have a family that needs help, or Betsetic, or public counsel helps us think through other things. It's really about not waiting for others, waiting for a system that is not there. And even if it's there, it's not built for the people that we work with and built for all of us. It's finding those partnerships and really, you said it, it's making sure our campuses, whether they're our Head Starts or our youth centers or our schools, it's making sure that we have strong partnerships with those that are already doing and walking the walk along with us, because walking with us means they're walking with our families. So I think that's the promise and the potential. And it is about opening up youth to really lead that as well. So.
Thank you for sharing. Angélica, any final words?
I just want to say, I think we all have to emulate the courage of our young people. So think about all the young men and women who are speaking up when their parents are being detained, who are fighting because they were they served our country in the military, and then they're home, and this is what's happening. They're speaking. They're in Congress. They're at the state capitol. They're speaking up against what's happening and being very courageous, because that attention brings with it a lot of, it's a lot of attention, and not all of that attention is actually attention that they want, right? And so we need to keep them safe. I think that matters, because, and what does that mean in terms of the safety is that, we're all protectors, we're protectors as they're moving, as they're moving forward. I work, and I'll finish with this, I work with families who have their loved ones in detention, as well as those who we have won bonds and now they're home. And they're working, and they've formed this group called Familias Unidas, United Families. And what are they doing? They're organizing themselves. They're talking about how can we stay in contact with the people who are in detention, and make sure that there's a lifeline, in a sense, especially because they think of all the people who don't have families, that are all by themselves, that are the only one. They're here by themselves in this country, and they're in these detention centers. And I just want to say, some of the people who have suffered the most are the people who are willing to do the most for others. And so I just want to say that's what it just inspires me so much to just do a little bit more, do it a little better, do it in coalition matters so much in this time. And I just want to say to the both of you, thank you so much, because just as much as you call us, we call you. So I think this is a moment to just understand the power that we all have, to do something for our neighbors, and to really build the country that really includes all of us, and that we can. This is a moment that we will be able to show how Americans stood up for each other, and how the power of family and love was way more powerful than the hate or the injustice that has been brought upon us.
Yes. Very enlightening. Thank you. Thank you to our panelists. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Estrada. So while we transition to our next panel, our photographer will be taking a photo of the panelists while we have our next panel transition over. Perfect. Thank you, Dr. Estrada, and thank you to all of our panelists for a thoughtful and important discussion. Can everyone please join me in thanking Angélica Salas, Drew Ferretti, and Margarita Luna. Now, our second panel focuses on growing the mental health workforce an issue that sits at the center of many of the challenges that were just previously discussed and the communities are navigating today. This conversation will explore what it takes to build and sustain that workforce and the partnerships that make it possible. Panelists, as I call your name, please come forward and take a seat on the panel. First, please welcome our moderator, Jolie Delja, Executive Director of AIM Youth Mental Health. Next, please welcome Dr. Virginia Castro, Superintendent of the Lawndale Elementary School District. Please join me in welcoming Lakeisha Clark, Principal of Orville Wright Middle School. One of our alums and family school partner schools as well. And then as well as Dr. Michelle Ferreros, Executive Director of Wellbeing and Student Support Services for the Los Angeles County Office of Education. I'll pass it over to you, Jolie.
All right. Well, first of all, I want to encourage you all to stand up for a second and take 3 deep breaths because your brain needs it. So I think we need to take a second and just oxygenate the brain. Truly 3 deep breaths. Inhale fully, exhale fully. 2 more times, because otherwise there's no way we're not going to fall asleep in the next 30 minutes before we get food. So once you've done that and you feel yourself waking back up, you might want to press your feet into the ground and really feel yourself in this space. Then we'll sit back down and we'll begin. Alrighty? So for the amazing leaders who are up here, we have several questions, and I'm going to invite them to also just directly talk to one another, because that's what's so exciting about this conversation. Schools are facing such great and growing demand for mental health support, and districts and schools continue to experience shortages in the professionals that we have in schools to meet those needs. So I want to ask each of you to share from your perspective, what are the challenges to increasing the mental health workforce? And Virginia, why don't I start with you?
Sure. So it's always a challenge because I think our need is greater than the staff that we have, especially now. The previous panelists alluded to the fact that we're dealing with so much crisis, not only with immigration, but post-COVID. Our kids are still recovering from that. Our families are still recovering from that. And there's always the looming threat, especially with this administration, of losing funding. So in the past, I've been in education for almost 3 decades. In the past, the first ones to be cut were our counselors and our social workers. So we can no longer afford that because the needs are too great. So we really rely on these partners to be able to sustain our students. They're not the same kind of kids. They're things that they're dealing with: social media, the fear of deportation, depression, anxiety, the social needs that our students are coming with and that the families are coming with. Their parents are in crisis as well. We as educators are just not equipped to deal with that alone. So with that looming threat that we constantly face, it really puts us in a place of fear to make sure that we can support the needs of our students. They can't learn if they're in crisis.
Lakeisha, I want to invite you in.
So I've been in education for about 26 years now, and when I first came into the district, there wasn't a big talk about the need for mental health resources at that time. And so as time has gone on, life happens, things come about in the world, you start to hear it more and more, but not everyone is really knowledgeable about the need to really have counselors, psychiatric social workers, and people who are really educated, knowledgeable, trained to assist our students. Along with that, it's not just our students who are in need, but also our staff, because we have a lot of staff members that are also impacted as well. So as time goes on, we get into that kind of patchwork mode where we're not proactive, but we're just being reactive. And sometimes it's kind of hard to kind of catch up to support and to deal with the crises that are going on with our students and our staff at that time.
Yeah, you're speaking to parallel processes, right? What we see in our children, we see in our parents, we see in our staff, we see in our administrators. So certainly we need to be thinking about it at all levels of the system. Michelle, what do you want to add to what Lakeisha and Virginia just shared?
So maybe less of an add, but more as an exclamation point to both the points that you made, Virginia. First off, around the understanding that mental health supports, counseling supports needs to be core, right? So similarly, I've also been in education for about 25 years. My background is in social work and school social work, starting off in a school district. And so many times and through the decades, we've seen ebbs and flows of funding. And, when we saw ESSER and COVID, there was a plethora of funding, right? And then you start feeling like, oh, geez, the funding's going away. What now do we do? Who are the first to get cut, right? And so then folks start looking at counseling and mental health professions. So I think that sustainability and really seeing mental health as really being a core of what our school systems need. If our students aren't well, they can't learn. So then, right? So we just need to always think of that. The fact that we have this opportunity today, right, from the School of Education here at LMU to really lift up and have this be a core conversation is a step to really solidifying the importance of what counseling, school counseling is, and school mental health, social work, all of those pieces. I think the other piece is also awareness. Lakeisha, you also mentioned that too, just the awareness of the need, right? And so the data that we're seeing, many folks are aware of, or maybe not, the California Healthy Kids Survey, right? That's a piece of data, school climate survey. Those are all pieces of data that we need to continue to look at. And not just as a piece of something as a data point, but really look at it as a core piece of how are we doing as a school, how are we doing as a school system?
Well, I think it begs the question, how does a district or school keep mental health as a core availability for the children? How do you do it? If the funding is going away, what's your choice point?
I'm going to jump in on
Yeah,
that.
I want you to, because I feel like you can't create money out of nowhere. So I think share more.
Yeah, so I think our previous panel spoke to two really big investments that are happening here in the state of California through the California Community Schools Partnership Program, or CCSPP, right, as well as CYBHI, or the California Youth Behavioral Health Initiative, right? This is historic funding that we have not seen before in the past. When we talk about $4 billion in each of those incentives, I think that that's huge. I think our state is asking us, right, to really rethink the systems and how do we really partner and start to speak each other's languages. So I think at LACO, what we're really trying to do as a county office of education is to support our districts and our LEAs. This is new, like brand new, right? For, again, our educators who are trying to understand Medi-Cal billing, how does that work? So sure, we've had other programs like LEA BUP or ESMA that are some areas, but this is really a shift in transforming things. And so we need to be able to capitalize on this opportunity, specifically here in LA County, to be able to figure out how do we find those entry points, because we do have the funding. It is available through Medi-Cal billing and schooling fee schedule. But how do we do that in a way that is truly collaborative, through partnerships, our community-based organizations, and continuing to build our workforce, as we're talking about here today, so that we can build up the folks who are already providing those services, yeah, to start to continue to bill, and then hopefully it be self-sustaining, right, in this work.
That's wonderful. Thank you for that. So, Lakeisha, you shared with me before our session that you have 450 students at your Orville Wright Middle School, where you're the principal, and you have one psychiatric social worker. You also have a few other support folks, a pupil services person and an academic counselor, and of course they all work together, but that caseload of one PSW for 450 students is, I think, a really important concrete thing for us to hear in this room. And I want to ask you, where do you feel are the greatest gaps in support for your students?
So just to step back a little bit, when I first got to Wright 5 years ago, we didn't have one at all. And so after my first year, it became very apparent to me that we weren't going to have the resources we had before COVID, because I came right after COVID. And then there was a need to have at least that one person on campus.
Right.
And so that right there was already a gap, and now we still feel like we still have a gap, even though we do have that one person there. We just jump in as a team, because I do have a really good team that comes together. Some of us are not trained to be psychiatric social workers, to deal with the mental health issues that are going on, including myself. But we take the lead from that person. She does do a very good job in trying to manage. She does have a caseload of about 10% of our students right now. So that is a lot just to even have on a caseload. So we do a lot of outreach to other organizations that can support. We do go through our district to find those, which everyone else in the district is doing the same way. And so there is going to continuously be a need until we can increase the number of psychiatric social workers on campus, which don't see that coming anytime soon.
Well, I'm sure that we all heard a theme from the last session in what you just said,
Yes.
which is people coming together, being scrappy, working together, communicating, asking for help, stepping in when it may not be your job.
Exactly.
But a crisis occurs, and then here we go as a team. We're going to support this child or this family. So I heard that in your response, and that really reminded me of the previous panel. I want to invite in Michelle and Virginia to comment on what Lakeisha said around having, one person with a caseload, and they're doing their very best. And if she had a magic wand, she told me earlier she'd have 4 more, right? So Virginia and Michelle, I want to invite you to respond to what Lakeisha shared.
So the types of trauma that we're seeing, I'm in a TK 8th grade district, and our kindergartners were coming in with all kinds of issues. These are the COVID babies. So the COVID babies, they're called bunker babies because they spent the majority of time in, playpens while their parents had to work, or if, either online or away from the home. They didn't receive the socialization. So I'm sure you've all seen Instagram posts and TikTok videos of kindergartners destroying classrooms. And that's what we were dealing with. So imagine middle schoolers that were also COVID babies. These are the kids that were in first grade, the prime foundational years for socialization and really that mental health support that's created. They didn't receive that. So we're dealing with all of these kids on top of just the stress that comes from social media. I have a 15-year, 16-year-old at home, and body dysmorphia is always a topic, right? They're dealing with things that us Gen Xers, where are the Gen Xers in the room? We didn't deal with, right? And nobody caught what we were doing online, first and foremost, right? But these kids, everything is documented. They're being judged harshly by their peers. They're being cyberbullied. Where do we begin with 450 kids and one social worker? It's just really not enough.
And your school district has 4,500?
We have approximately 4,500 students.
And you have a social worker in each of your 8 schools,
We
which
have
is it's a
one.
very similar model to what Lakeisha has. Michelle, what other gaps are you seeing?
Well, I just want to comment just really quickly on 2 incredible leaders that we have here in school site and at a district level who recognize and see the importance and the priority of youth mental health, right? And so, Lakeisha, when you say, gosh, when you came and you had nobody there, they had previously probably had staff there, but when you realized quickly, fast, right, that was a need that had to be filled, and it was a gap, and you prioritize that, I think that's huge. So I just wanted to name that for a moment because many times we don't have principals or administrators or superintendents, right, who see that immediately as a priority. And so I guess that kind of goes back to a previous point that I had made around the importance of raising awareness of the importance of this, right? And so we have again, people who have the heart and who understand youth and the needs. But how is that fair if it's inconsistent across the board and across our county and across our state? But I just wanted to lift that for just a moment, and that's what really resonated with me. I don't know if it was related to the question necessarily.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
yeah.
That's wonderful. I agree. Our superintendents and our principals up here who are walking the talk. That's incredible, and we appreciate you both. Virginia, I want to ask you, your district has a strong partnership with LMU to prepare school counselors. You have interns that go into your schools and work with your school counselors. How has it been preparing that next generation of school mental health personnel?
So I can resonate with your definition of scrappy, because we will be scrappy. We will do whatever we can to make sure that our kids have the support that they need. And I want to give a shout out to Dr. Maria Ruelas. She's our district social worker. She's in the audience. And she's the one who oversees our internship program. So we do have partnerships with a lot of universities, and we create a pipeline. So these interns come in, and they can get their BSW, their MSW, their counseling, thank you. And we support them, we supervise them. They also are required to take the mental health first aid kit so that they know how to respond to students in crisis. And they have been such a support system because we're training our future social workers. So with the onset of community schools, a lot of our social workers transitioned into becoming coordinators of community schools at our school sites. So that opened up opportunities for us to hire more social workers. Well, we had a pool, an in-house pool of well-trained social workers. So we were able to tap in those. So 6 of our 8 social workers are former interns that came up through the pipeline of our university partners.
That's amazing. That's amazing. That career pathway is huge. We have to build the pipeline. And it's relational because they get to know you and their principals, their bosses.
Absolutely.
They get to know the children and the families when they're interns, right? And so not only is it helpful because it opens that career pathway for them and they have that job, but it the community is there. And so when they get hired, they've been known. They're a known entity. I think that's a really powerful part of it. Ladies, what do you want to add on to what Virginia shared?
So I'll add on. I'm at a different level. So for us, we do receive interns. Matter of fact, we have one from LMU right now. And it really does help because they get to experience what's going on right now while they're at the school site. So they get that hands-on experience, and maybe one day they'll get to stay at our school, but if not, then they have the experience to kind of continue within LAUSD as they need to.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah, I think it's really exciting to be able to see so many of the residency programs and internship programs continue to grow. I think very similarly at the county level, we're both as direct service providers to our LACO school sites, our juvenile court sites, as well as our county community schools, but also as folks who support with capacity building. So each year we have about 60 interns that join us and are placed. And with this partnership with LMU, is just super excited to also be able to share the experiences of what happens in a juvenile court school, right? Particularly when we think about our juvenile court schools, these are our youth who have been failed by our system over and over again, right? And so what an opportunity for our future social workers, future counselors, future mental health professionals in the school sites to be able to see and experience and know and learn from our youth about what we can do better, while also being able to provide, right, those services, those direct services for youth. I think that what's also really important, and perhaps I think that we talked about this right before, is just thinking about the pipeline, right? And thinking about how early that pipeline can start. I think through community schooling, which we see as a school transformation, really equity-based strategy, there is an opportunity for schools at a local level to really identify what are the assets and strengths that they have and what are the gaps and areas of growth, right? And bringing them a collaborative shared decision-making council to make those decisions. And so we've seen just throughout the region beautiful examples of when they identify mental health as this multi-interest holder group of students, families, staff, they themselves identify, right, as mental health as the issue. Then we are able to see the really centering of agency and empowerment of student voice. And so some of the examples that we've seen are even from the elementary school level, being peer leaders around mental health. And so starting off that young to be able to expose them, one, to empathy, right? And when we think about, many times we talk about anti-bullying, why don't we teach empathy, right? And that starts from that age. And so many times we see that beauty, right? From elementary school up until middle school. And then in high school, when we think about our pathways, right? Our career technical education pathways, and opportunities there to also be peer leaders, but also maybe to get some credit in certain areas. And then through CYBHI, having now what's called the Certified Wellness Coach certification, right? Where it's BA level and AA level, high school level, all the way up to the master's level to be certified to then be able to bill. So I think that thinking about the pipeline, just even beyond, right, the residency and the internship, but how can we start to build systems from the very beginning? Because the youth, and for any of us who have kids who are elementary age, we know that they are very smart and strong opinions, right? And that they will speak their voice and really be heard. And so just echoing what the previous panel said about the power of our youth are today. They are leaders of today. I will walk into classrooms. They are leading the community building circles. They're the ones who are creating the activities for the entire school and for entire districts. I mean, blown away, blown away.
Ladies, what do you want to add to what Michelle just shared?
Student agency. I wanted to just share a story. We had 300 students walk out a few weeks ago, and it was led by a 7th grader whose uncle had been deported. So again, we utilized our social workers to create alternative activities where their voices could be heard and we can celebrate their agency in positive ways. So they created murals, they wrote to senators, and really giving them that agency because we were scared, right? We don't want 300 7th and 8th graders walking down the streets of Lawndale into Hawthorne. But we did utilize our staff to make sure that they know that their opinions are important, their voice is heard, but let's give them alternatives. So again, how we utilize our mental health providers to support student and student agencies.
So if I can jump in really quick, Lakeisha, I think we may know that when students feel agency, their mental health outcomes are better. When students feel that they belong, their mental health outcomes are better. When they feel less hopelessness, or a better way of saying it is when they feel more hope, their mental health outcomes are better. So all of the things that we are discussing today in both panels around engaging young people's voices and giving them a place where they can make a difference, that has a dual effect of making a difference in their community and leading to their own positive mental health outcomes. So we're doing two things at once when we're inviting kids in this way. And AIM would 100% agree that the pipeline for mental health professionals starts very, very early on. You all may know that over 90% of our mental health professionals are women. So a big area that we need to talk about is, why are our boys not seeing themselves here? Why do our teen boys not go to therapy and get help? Why do they not become adult therapists? That's a big hole that we all have to think really hard about, right? So I think there's a lot here that you all are bringing up, really important. The pipeline starts with our kindergartners, right? And so on. So, Lakeisha, what else do you want to say?
The last thing I will say is one of the things that we do every year is we have a career fair. And at that career fair, my PSW or psychiatric social worker, she always has a table so that she could talk about what her position does, how it benefits students, just to make that connection. And at first I wondered, oh, why was she having a table? But when I stood there and I heard how she explained what she does and how much she enjoyed it, she made a connection with a lot of our students, and they started thinking about, well, maybe that's something I want to do. So when you mentioned about, starting very young, it sparks something in them to start thinking about, hey, what do you do? I have kids that come to my office and say, what do you actually do? And they take one of my cards and I tell them, you can always come in my office. You want to shadow me for a couple hours one day?
Lovely.
So allowing students to see what you do, and that there's not just the teacher and the counselor and the principal there, but there's other jobs there as well. Get into those professions, find out what they do. And as we share it more and more with people and they make the connection that there's a need, especially now, then they'll start to draw to that particular profession.
They can envision themselves,
Yes,
right? Yeah,
definitely.
Michelle, I want to highlight something important and give you a chance to comment on it, and that is that LMU School of Ed and LACO recently secured an award for a school counselor residency program, which you've referenced a couple of times. The aim is to strengthen the pipeline of school-based mental health professionals. So I just want to ask you, how does something like that come together? How do we develop these types of innovative partnerships, for example, between an LMU School of Ed and LACO, where you unlock this funding? Say more about that.
Yeah, I think that I'm, again, so excited about the opportunity, and I cannot take credit for that partnership as I wasn't in those conversations, but it starts with relationships first, and the innovation and the willingness to be open and creative and really thinking beyond our islands of excellence. I heard somebody say that, right? Instead of silos, right? But our islands of excellence where we are. But so many times, right, we're so stuck in our organizations really thinking about the day-to-day, right? Like what we need to get done. But when and especially when we think about community schooling, which is really around so many different pieces of being collaborative and shared decision-making, our education system, and so many times, like we hear this, right? It's so hard to get in the door. It's so hard to figure out the education system. But it's the willingness of both organizations and partners, right, to really see the value that we have to come together to do this, right? We cannot do this alone. And I know that that sounds cliche, and that's something that we often use, but is absolutely true, that we cannot do this work alone, and to really think about partners outside of who we typically work with, right? We have a great partnership with our Department of Mental Health, but when we think about specifically pipelines, we know that we need to work with institutions of higher education, and that's so important. And I also just think about, particularly when we think about schools of education and not just counseling programs or social work programs, that we need to be thinking about mental health. And I think that perhaps we as a panel have been thinking about mental health in that tier 3, right? Tier 3 level when we have our groups or counseling. But also in our education, we absolutely need to think about the systems that we are creating and the different entry points for youth and families to access mental health. And so yes, some folks might be gravitating and leaning towards that tier 3 individual services, but it's the everyday things, it's the relationships and the love that we show inside our classrooms, right? Our teachers, our office staff, those who are helping in the cafeteria, right? How do we do that? And how do we even build programming throughout the school day so that everyone has access to mental health? And so I just think about that and the partnership to be able to really think beyond what it is that we have historically thought about and realize all of those elements are important, that multi-tiered system of support that goes along with school counseling as well as with mental health supports too.
Right, you're speaking to preventative efforts, efforts that are school-wide, efforts that are universal, efforts that may reach our little ones who really, when you're talking about early childhood mental health, you're talking about parents immediately, right? You mentioned, Lakeisha, that the families at your school need support in addition to the students at your school, right? So we're talking about all the tiers and all the entry points that young people have in terms of interacting with trauma-informed systems, systems that support their self-regulation, systems that support them if they have an urgent or emergent need. Yeah. Ladies, what do you want to add to what Michelle said?
I just want to add, I totally agree with Michelle. I don't think that we can afford to see mental health and social emotional learning as anything other than the core anymore. So these things have to be part of our curriculum. Mental health providers can't be seen as additional supplemental ancillary staff. They should be seen just as important as teachers who teach reading and math. Because students need to be taught to self-regulate. Social and emotional learning has to be part of our everyday speak. So I agree with everything you said, and I'm so glad to have this opportunity to have this platform to be able to address this need.
Yes, the research shows that if kids are self-regulated, they do better in all skills in their lives, in their ability to learn, in their reading and math scores, and even in their long-term health outcomes. So if we invest in that, as you suggested, we're actually investing in their reading and math outcomes, because I know so many of us have to answer for those too, right? So Lakeisha, what else do you want to add?
Just to leave you with this, I think LAUSD has really made that move towards making sure that it's part of our curriculum. I know most of our schools have a social and emotional learning curriculum, and they try to really not just have it as something separate, but embed it into when you're starting class, checking on students, how are they doing, asking questions, and it becomes a routine. So that is something that a lot of schools have moved towards, to do it across the board, but we still have that gap when it comes to those individual needs.
I want to give each of our panelists a moment to leave you with a final reflection, wrap us up with a bow, so to speak. So I'm going to start with Michelle, and then we'll go to Lakeisha, and then end with Virginia. So just a final reflection from each of them from this, I think, very productive and interesting conversation. Go ahead, Michelle.
Thanks so much. So Lakeisha, sorry, you just also mentioned something that made me think about kind of going back to my last comment of thinking about how we integrate school mental health and counseling into the system, and really lifting up that again, it doesn't need to be always, right? I think that the 3 tiers that absolutely are essential. But when we think about creativity, and we think about the creativity of partnerships and really thinking outside the box, I had an opportunity to visit one school who I was truly inspired by, who had multiple programs throughout the day, in the classroom, outside the classroom. One of the things that they did was had a walking club. Simple walking club during recess, right? Where some students weren't necessarily comfortable playing with their peers, but also was an opportunity for them to share their feelings with their counselor, right? So they named it as a walking club. And so whatever, again, that opportunity is, I think is so important. But the last thing I will say, we talked a lot about centering student voice and agency and empowerment. I also want to lift up our families and our caregivers and our educators in this space, and our community partners in true community schooling, just vision, right? Bringing everyone to the table is so important. So I think that the opportunities to continue these types of conversations with folks who maybe we are so comfortable, and like typically we'll be in our offices, we'll have a group, our coordination of services team, right? But thinking about expanding that to include more voices, really, that's where we see the power of community schooling, and why we see the outcomes, that the early indicators and outcomes that we're seeing is because everyone is coming together. And so we cannot, no more is the time, right, to go back in public education where it is a single person making a decision, but really has to be a collective effort. Again, centering students, having parents and caregivers at that, and our educators who are in the classrooms with them for 6 hours a day is so important to have.
Thank you. Lakeisha?
I'm going to take it from a different perspective. Not as many words. But we've spent a lot of time talking about our youth, our students, and in some instances, our staff and our parents. But what about us personally? Okay, so my word of advice or last thoughts is start your day in the right mind frame. What are you doing for yourself to make sure that your day goes well and that you can be a support to someone else?
Thank you for that. Appreciate that. And Virginia.
I just want to say kudos to both of you. I think it's so true, right? We are dealing with heavy times, and as leaders, we're dealing with a lot of heaviness. So making sure that we're taking care of our children, their parents, our staffs, but ourselves. There's a billboard off the 110 that says, "Imagine if we treated mental health the same way we treat physical health." And I think that we just need to change the narrative, right? We need to prioritize mental health for all of the stakeholders, for ourselves, for our community partners, and really just embrace each other as a community. Because hopefully one day, like you said, we'll look back on these times and say, yes, sí triunfamos, right? We triumphed against these times, and our kids came out productive citizens. So, but that takes an entire village.
Please join me in thanking Jolie Delja, Dr. Virginia Castro, Dr. Michelle Castelo-Aferes, and Lakeisha Clark for sharing their perspectives with us today. Now, to offer a few closing reflections, and then we'll do a photo right after the reflections. It is my pleasure to welcome back the Dean of Loyola Marymount University School of Education, Dr. Estela Zarate.
Thank you to all of you who are here and to our panelists. And thank you, Fernando and Jolie, for facilitating these wonderful conversations. Again, a lot of gratitude to all of you who were able to participate today. I am left feeling inspired by so many courageous people, and I know there's many of you in the audience too, because I know the work that you do. But what I sense is there is a lot of people who have the courage to reinforce, to back up what our communities are wanting from us. And I'm inspired to keep listening to what it is that our communities and our families need. Thank you once again to Kaiser Permanente for our event sponsor and everyone in the audience for making the time to be here. I want to close, so one more thing. I want to close by reading a quote that reflects the heart and spirit of what we're doing here at the School of Education. And this quote is from Pope Leo's apostolic letter written last fall. The letter is called Drawing New Maps of Hope. And he writes, "Putting the person at the center means helping them discover the meaning of life, their inalienable dignity, and their responsibility towards others. Education is not only the transmission of content, but also the learning of virtues. It forms citizens capable of serving and believers capable of witnessing. Men and women who are freer, no longer alone." So here today, we are citizens and believers, the people who are freer and no longer alone. I hope this conversation inspires us to commit to being agents of hope, like many of our presenters here. Now, before we wrap up, I want to mention LMU Day of Giving next week on March 18th. We kindly encourage our friends and supporters to engage with SOE in any way that is meaningful to you during the annual challenge, and I thank you in advance for your generosity. Please join me now for snacks and refreshments on the Rose Hill Terrace on the second floor. You can access it this way or outside in the outdoor stairs. I look forward to seeing you there, and thank you once again.